Jake Harrison stood in the center of the massive room, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The walls stretched high above him, covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. Around him sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and every single one of them was staring at him with what he could only describe as disgust. The Galactic Council had been meeting for 3 days straight. 3 days of debates, arguments, and discussions about one simple question: should humans be allowed to join their peaceful alliance of species? Jake had spent months preparing for this moment. He had studied every species, learned their customs, and practiced his speeches until he could recite them in his sleep. He thought he was ready. He was wrong. The Zephyrian Chancellor rose from its crystal throne. Its body looked like living glass, shifting between different colors as it moved. When it spoke, its voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. "The species known as humans have been observed for 50 years, the Chancellor said. "We have watched your wars, your conflicts, your endless need to fight each other, and everything around you. We have seen enough." Jake felt his heart sink. This was not how the speech was supposed to start. He looked around the room at the other delegates. The Aquarian representative floated in a tank of blue liquid, its tentacles moving in what Jake had learned was their version of nodding in agreement. The insect-like hive mind clicked its mandibles together, a sound that made Jake's skin crawl. "Your species is violent," continued the Chancellor. "You cannot work together without arguing. You fight over resources, over land, over ideas. You even fight over who your leaders should be. This is not the way of peaceful beings." Jake stepped forward. "Chancellor, if I may respond." "You may not," the Chancellor cut him off. "We have heard enough human words. We have seen enough human actions. The decision has been made." The room fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Behind him, he knew the rest of the human delegation was holding their breath. Captain Lisa Morgan had warned him this might happen, but Jake had refused to believe it. Humans had so much to offer the galaxy. They had brilliant scientists, brave explorers, and innovative thinkers. How could the Council not see that? The mantis delegate, a creature that looked like a praying mantis the size of a human, spoke next. Its voice was sharp and cold. "Humans destroy everything they touch. They poison their own world, kill their own animals, and wage war against their own kind. They are a cancer that must be contained." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "That's not fair," he said, his voice louder than he intended. "Yes, we have problems. Yes, we make mistakes, but we also learn from them. We grow. We change. You prove our point with your outburst," said the ethereal representative. The ethereals looked almost like humans, except their skin glowed with a soft light and their eyes were pure white. "Even now in this sacred chamber you raise your voice in anger. You cannot control your emotions." "Emotions are not weakness," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "They are what make us strong. They drive us to protect what we love, to fight for what is right, to never give up even when things seem impossible." The hive mind made a buzzing sound that Jake recognized as laughter. Individual emotions are chaos. We have moved beyond such primitive responses. We think as one, act as one, exist as one. This is the way of advanced species. Jake looked around the room again. Every species here was different, but they all had one thing in common. They had given up their individual thoughts and feelings to become part of something larger. The Zephyrians shared a crystal consciousness. The Aquarians swam in collective thoughts. Even the ethereals, who looked most like humans, had abandoned personal desires for what they called universal harmony. "Maybe that's the problem," Jake said quietly. "You've all forgotten what it means to be individuals. You've forgotten what it means to disagree, to struggle, to overcome challenges on your own. You think peace means everyone thinking the same thoughts and feeling the same feelings. But that's not peace, that's just emptiness." The Chancellor's crystal body flashed bright red. "Enough. The Council has reached its decision unanimously. The human species is hereby banned from all Council territories and activities." You will return to your home system and remain there. Any attempt to expand beyond your solar system will be met with force. Jake felt the words hit him like a physical blow. You can't do this. We have colonies being planned. We have ships being built. We have people who dream of exploring the stars. Your dreams end here, the Mantis delegate said. Your species is too dangerous to be allowed among civilized beings. You will stay in your cage, where you can fight each other all you want without threatening the rest of us. The Aquarian delegate's tentacles writhed as it spoke through its translator. This decision is final. Council security forces will establish monitoring stations around your system. Any ship that attempts to leave will be destroyed. Jake turned to look at the human delegation. Captain Lisa Morgan's face was stone cold, but he could see the fire burning in her eyes. Dr. Alex Turner was already taking notes, probably calculating how many projects they would have to cancel. The others looked stunned, hurt, angry. This is a mistake, Jake said, turning back to face the council. You're making enemies of people who wanted to be your friends. You're pushing away a species that could have helped you grow and learn. We do not need to grow, the ethereal said. We have achieved perfection. We have peace. We have harmony. We have order. You have stagnation, Jake replied. You have fear. You're so afraid of change, so afraid of anything different, that you lock it away and pretend it doesn't exist. The Chancellor rose to its full height, towering over Jake. Guards, escort the humans to their ship. They have 1 day to leave. Council space. As the guards approached, Jake made one last attempt. You think you're protecting the galaxy from us, but you're wrong. You're protecting yourselves from growth, from change, from becoming something better than what you are. The guards surrounded the human delegation and began leading them toward the exit. Jake looked back one more time at the assembled council members. They sat in their seats like statues, cold and unmoved by his words. Captain Morgan walked beside him as they left the chamber. What do we do now? She asked quietly. Jake straightened his shoulders and looked ahead toward their ship. Now we go home and show them what humans can really do when we put our minds to it. Behind them, the council chamber fell silent once. More. The delegates congratulated themselves on containing a dangerous threat. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. President Karen Walsh looked out the window of her office on Luna Base and smiled. 5 years ago, this place had been nothing but empty gray rock and dreams. Now it stretched as far as she could see, filled with massive factories, shipyards, and research centers. The site never failed to amaze her. Madam President, General Cooper is here to see you, her secretary announced through the speaker. Send him in, Karen replied, turning away from the window. General Ryan Cooper walked into the office carrying a thick folder of reports. His uniform was different from the old Earth military ones. This one bore the symbol of something new, the Human Colonial Defense Force. Karen had created it 3 years ago when it became clear that Earth needed to defend itself. Good morning, Madam President, Ryan said, setting the folder on her desk. I have the monthly progress report. Karen sat down and opened the folder. The numbers inside made her grin. These can't be right. We're building ships faster than the Council species? Not just faster, Ryan said proudly. Better. Our new fusion drives are 30% more powerful than anything they have. The hull materials Dr. Price developed are stronger and lighter. And the best part? We figured out how to travel faster than light without using their gate network. Karen leaned back in her chair. When the Council had banned humanity from their territories, they had also cut them off from the network of jump gates that allowed quick travel between star systems. The aliens thought this would trap humans in their home system forever. They thought wrong. How did we manage that? Karen asked. Dr. Helen Price can explain it better than I can, Ryan replied. But the simple version is that we approach the problem differently. The Council species design everything for group minds. We design for individual creativity. It turns out that makes a huge difference. A few minutes later, Dr. Helen Price joined them in the office. She was young for such an important position, but her mind worked faster than anyone Karen had ever met. Helen carried a small device that looked like a metal cube. This is our breakthrough, Helen said, placing the cube on the desk. The council species use quantum fields that require collective consciousness to operate. They literally think their ships through space as a group mind, but we can't do that because we're individuals. So we found a different way, Ryan added. Helen nodded excitedly. We use quantum manipulation that responds to individual will. Each ship has its own drive system that bonds with its pilot. The ship becomes an extension of the person flying it. It's actually faster and more flexible than their group system. Karen picked up the cube and turned it over in her hands. It was warm to the touch and seemed to hum with energy. And this is safe? Completely, Helen said. We've run thousands of tests. The first full-scale test flight happens next week. Ryan opened another file. While Helen was working on the drive systems, we've been busy with other projects. Admiral Steve Johnson has been training our new pilots. The techniques he's developed are unlike anything the Council has seen. Karen had met Admiral Johnson several times. He was an older man who had served in Earth's old Navy before the Council rejection. Now he commanded a growing fleet of ships that existed in complete secrecy. Where exactly is Admiral Johnson right now? Karen asked. Ryan and Helen exchanged a look. That's classified even from you, Madam President, but I can tell you that our first colony mission launched 2 weeks ago. Karen's eyes widened. We're already expanding. I thought we were still in the planning phase. The planning phase ended 6 months ago, Ryan said. Commander Amy Foster is leading a small group of volunteers to establish our first settlement outside the solar system. If the Council catches them, they'll deny any connection to Earth. The thought of humans already living on alien worlds sent a thrill through Karen's chest. After 5 years of being trapped in their home system, the idea of breaking free felt incredible. How many people are we talking about? She asked. 200 volunteers on 3 ships, Helen replied. They're heading to a system we've designated as Target Alpha. Rich in minerals, good planets for farming, and completely ignored by the Council because they think it's too dangerous for their species. Too dangerous how? Ryan grinned. The gravity is too strong. The radiation is too high and the weather is too unpredictable. Perfect for humans, in other words. Karen laughed. During the Council hearings 5 years ago, the aliens had listed humanity's ability to survive in harsh environments as another reason they were dangerous. They said humans were too adaptable, too willing to live in places where civilized species couldn't survive. Now that adaptability was becoming humanity's greatest advantage. What about resources? Karen asked. These colonies will need supplies, equipment, support. That's the beautiful part, Helen said. We're not just sending colonists. We're sending complete industrial packages. Within a year, our first colony should be producing its own ships, weapons, and supplies. Within 5 years, it should be launching its own colonies. Ryan nodded. We're not expanding like the Council species, one system at a time with careful planning and committee meetings. We're expanding like humans have always expanded, fast, bold, and ready to adapt to whatever we find. Karen stood up and walked back to the window. Outside, she could see construction crews working on another new project. The Luna shipyards were building vessels designed for exploration, colonization, and, if necessary, war. What happens when the Council finds out? She asked. They won't, Ryan said confidently. At least not for a long time. Our stealth technology is based on quantum masking. Dr. Paul Grant's team developed it last year. Council sensors can't detect our ships when the masking is active. Helen joined Karen at the window. The Council made a mistake when they rejected us. They thought they were containing a dangerous species, but they were actually freeing us from their rules, their limitations, their fear of change. They wanted us to stay in our cage and fight among ourselves, Ryan added. Instead, we're using our fighting spirit to forge something they never expected. Karen watched a new ship lift off from the launch pad below. It was sleek and fast, designed by humans, for human needs. No committees had voted on its design. No collective consciousness had approved its mission. It was pure human ambition made real. How long before we're ready to reveal ourselves? She asked. Ryan and Helen looked at each other again. 10 years, Ryan said finally. Maybe 15. By then, we'll have dozens of colonies, hundreds of ships, and millions of people spread across the galaxy. When we finally announce ourselves, it won't be as Earth requesting permission to join their club." Karen turned back to them with a smile that would have terrified the council delegates. "What will it be?" "It'll be the human colonial empire introducing itself to the galaxy," Helen said, "and asking them if they'd like to join us." Outside the window, another ship launched toward the stars. The age of human expansion had begun, and the council had no idea what was coming. Captain Nick Davis stood on the bridge of his ship, the Pioneer, and watched another new world appear on the main screen. This was his 15th star system in 2 years, and each one still filled him with wonder. The planet below was covered in purple oceans and green continents completely untouched by any intelligent life. "Scan complete, Captain," reported his science officer, Lieutenant Sam Porter. "No signs of council monitoring stations, no alien settlements, rich mineral deposits in the northern continent, and the atmosphere is perfect for human colonization." Nick smiled and made a note in his log. "Mark this system as suitable for Phase 2 expansion. Send the coordinates back to command." 20 years had passed since the Council's rejection of humanity. 20 years of secret growth, hidden colonies, and careful expansion. What had started with 3 ships and 200 volunteers had become something the Council could never have imagined. The Pioneer was one of 50 exploration ships now mapping the galaxy. Each ship was built with the latest human technology, invisible to Council sensors and faster than anything the aliens had ever created. Nick's crew of 12 was hand-picked from the best explorers humanity had to offer. "Captain, incoming message from New Texas Colony," announced Communications Officer Jenny Mills. "Put it through," Nick said. The face of Colony Administrator Beth Martinez appeared on the screen. She looked tired but happy, standing in what appeared to be a busy control room. Behind her, Nick could see people working at computers and moving. "Equipment." "Captain Davis, good to see you again," Beth said with a warm smile. "I wanted to give you an update on our progress." Nick had visited New Texas 6 months ago when it was still a collection of prefabricated shelters and mining equipment. The planet had been a barren rock then, suitable only for resource extraction. "What's the current status?" Nick asked. "We've hit all our production targets for the quarter," Beth replied proudly. "The mining operations are extracting rare minerals, faster than we can ship them out. But the real news is our terraforming project. We've managed to create an atmosphere suitable for human life across 30% of the main continent." Nick raised his eyebrows. 30%? That's incredible. The original plan called for 10% in the first 5 years. Beth laughed. "Turns out humans are pretty good at changing entire worlds when we put our minds to it. We've got rivers, flowing, grass growing, and the first Earth animals were successfully introduced last month." This was what amazed Nick most about human expansion. The Council species took centuries to properly colonize a new world. They planned every detail, studied every possible outcome, and moved with careful deliberation. Humans just showed up and started building. "How's the population growth?" Nick asked. "We're up to 15,000 permanent residents," Beth replied, "plus another 5,000 temporary workers from the mining crews. And Captain, we've started construction on our own shipyard. Within 2 years, New Texas will be launching its own exploration missions." After ending the call, Nick turned to his navigation officer. "Set course for the Vega system. I want to check on the mega shipyard project." 3 days later, the Pioneer arrived at humanity's greatest achievement. The Vega shipyard was massive beyond belief, stretching across empty space like a metal city. Ships in various stages of construction floated in protective cradles, while thousands of workers moved between them in small shuttles. Engineer Tony Lee met Nick at the docking bay. Tony was responsible for the shipyard's construction, and his pride in the project was obvious from the moment Nick stepped aboard. "Welcome to the future of human expansion," Tony said, leading Nick through corridors filled with bustling activity. "We're currently building 12 exploration ships, 8 colony vessels, and 4 military cruisers simultaneously." They entered an observation deck that offered a view of the entire facility. Nick counted over 30 ships in various stages of completion. Workers in spacesuits crawled over the hulls like ants, welding, installing, and testing systems. How? Does our production compare to Council shipyards? Nick asked. Tony grinned. We're building ships 5 times faster than their fastest facility. The secret is modular construction. Instead of building each ship from scratch, we manufacture standardized components that can be assembled quickly. And the Council hasn't noticed all this activity? Dr. Paul Grant's quantum masking technology is working perfectly, Tony replied. From the outside, this entire system looks empty. Council sensors can't detect us, and their ships haven't come within 50 light years of here. Nick spent the rest of the day touring the facility. He met workers from dozens of different human colonies, each contributing their skills to the shipbuilding effort. The diversity amazed him. These people had grown up on different worlds under different suns, but they all shared the same human drive to build something better. His next stop was the medical research station orbiting Proxima Centauri. Dr. Sally Brown, the head of the Biological Adaptation Program, showed him the latest developments in human enhancement. We've made remarkable progress, Dr. Brown explained as they walked through laboratories filled with complex equipment. Humans can now survive on worlds that would kill any Council species within minutes. She showed Nick data from recent colony missions. Humans were now living comfortably on high-gravity worlds, high-radiation environments, and planets with toxic atmospheres. Genetic modifications allowed them to breathe different gas mixtures and survive temperature extremes. The Council rejected us partly because they said we were too adaptable, Dr. Brown said with a smile. They thought it made us dangerous. They were right, but not in the way they expected. Nick's final stop was a meeting with Major Kate Williams, who commanded the reconnaissance teams that monitored Council activities. Her report was both encouraging and troubling. The Council has grown complacent, Kate explained, showing Nick intelligence reports on alien military forces. Their fleets haven't been upgraded in 2 centuries. Their tactics haven't changed in even longer. They're so focused on maintaining peace and order that they've forgotten how to adapt to new threats. What about their expansion efforts? Nick asked. Practically non-existent, Kate replied. They've added 3 new systems in 20 years. Meanwhile, we've established colonies in 47 systems and have exploration teams mapping hundreds more. Nick studied the reports. The Council controlled thousands of systems, but their expansion had slowed to almost nothing. They were so focused on managing what they already had that they weren't growing anymore. They're stagnating, he realized. Kate nodded. Exactly. While we've been building an empire, they've been maintaining a museum. When this secret finally comes out, they're going to be in for the shock of their lives. Nick left the meeting with a new understanding of humanity's position in the galaxy. They weren't just hiding from the Council anymore. They had built something that surpassed the Council in almost every measurable way. That night, as the Pioneer traveled toward its next destination, Nick made a personal log entry. The Council thought they were protecting the galaxy from humanity, he recorded. They believed that keeping us confined to one system would prevent us from causing trouble. They were wrong. By trying to cage us, they freed us from their rules and limitations. We've spent 20 years building something they could never create, an empire based on individual creativity rather than collective conformity. He paused and looked out at the stars. I wonder what they'll think when they finally realize what we've accomplished. Scout Commander Dan Murphy was having a routine day until everything went wrong. His small patrol ship, the Ranger, was quietly mapping asteroid fields in the Centauri rim when his sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. Captain, Julie Clark, this is Murphy, he said into his radio. We have a problem. 3 Council enforcement ships had just dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of him. They were Zephyrian vessels, their crystal hulls glowing with hostile energy. Dan had been running reconnaissance missions for 5 years, and this was his worst nightmare coming true. Murphy, report your status, came Captain Clark's voice over the radio. She was commanding the patrol squadron from her ship, the Defiant, 20,000 kilometers away. 3 Council ships just appeared, Dan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. They're powering weapons and demanding to know what I'm doing in their space. Their space? Captain Clark's voice was sharp. That system was unclaimed the last time we checked. Before Dan could respond, the lead council ship opened a communication channel. The face of a Zephyrian captain appeared on his screen, its crystal features twisted with anger. "Human vessel, you are in violation of council law," the alien captain said. "Your species is banned from leaving your home system. Explain your presence here immediately." Dan looked at his instruments. His quantum masking was active, so they shouldn't have been able to detect him. Either their technology had improved or something had gone very wrong. "I repeat, explain your presence," the Zephyrian demanded. Captain Clark's voice crackled through Dan's earpiece. "Murphy, maintain your cover story. Tell them you're lost." But as Dan opened his mouth to lie, something inside him rebelled. For 30 years, humans had been hiding, sneaking around the galaxy like criminals. They had built an empire in secret, always looking over their shoulders, always afraid of discovery. Suddenly Dan was tired of being afraid. "My presence," Dan said to the Zephyrian captain. "I'm here because this is human space now." The alien's crystal body flashed bright red. "Impossible. Humans are confined to their home system by council. Decree." "Your decree expired about 40 colonies ago," Dan replied. Captain Clark's voice exploded in his earpiece. "Murphy, what are you doing?" But it was too late. The secret was out, and there was no taking it back. Within minutes, Captain Clark's entire squadron had moved to surround the council ships. 12 human vessels against 3 alien ones. Captain Clark opened a general communication channel that reached all ships in the area. Her voice was calm and steady, but Dan could hear the iron underneath. "This is Captain Julie Clark of the Terran Colonial Fleet," she announced. "I claim this system under the authority of the human colonial empire. You are trespassing in our territory." The Zephyrian captain's crystal body cycled through several colors before settling on a deep purple that Dan recognized as confusion. "Human colonial empire?" the alien said. "There is no such thing. Humans were confined to one system." "You confined us to one system," Captain Clark corrected. "We decided that wasn't acceptable." Within hours, news of the encounter had reached the highest levels of both governments. The Council's response was swift and predictable. If humans wanted to violate their confinement, they would be reminded of their place through force. Admiral Keth Moore of the Aquarian Navy was chosen to lead the Punishment Fleet. He was a veteran commander who had fought in the last great Galactic War 3 centuries ago. His reputation for crushing rebellions was legendary throughout Council space. 200 ships assembled at the rally point: Zephyrian crystal cruisers, Aquarian bioships, Mantis swarm fighters, and ethereal energy vessels. It was the largest Council fleet assembled in over a century, and Admiral Keth Moore was confident it would be more than enough to handle a few human pirates. "These humans think they can challenge the established order," Admiral Keth Moore told his officers. "We will show them the price of defying the Council." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for the Centauri system where the humans had been detected. Admiral Keth Moore expected to find a small group of desperate refugees in stolen ships. What he found instead changed everything. Admiral Grace Taylor was waiting for them with the 3rd Colonial Fleet. 500 human ships arranged in formations that the Council had never seen before, instead of the rigid battle lines preferred. By alien fleets, the human ships moved in fluid groups that seemed to dance around each other. "Aquarian Fleet, this is Admiral Taylor of the Human Colonial Navy," came the transmission. "You are in violation of human territorial space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Keth Moore's tentacles writhed in what his species considered laughter. "Human Colonial Navy? You are refugees playing with toys. Surrender now, and your punishment will be merciful." "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from their ships. Their technology appears to be different from our records." "Different how?" "More advanced, sir. Significantly more advanced." Admiral Keth Moore dismissed this concern. How could humans have advanced technology? They had been cut off from Council trade and scientific exchange for 30 years. The battle began exactly as Admiral Keth Moore expected. His ships moved into standard Council formation while preparing their collective consciousness battle coordination. What happened next defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. The human ships didn't fight like a collective. They fought like individuals who somehow knew exactly what each other was thinking. Captain Emma Ross's destroyer squadron moved like a pack of hunting animals, each ship covering the others without any apparent central command. Commander Rob Peterson's cruiser group struck at weak points in the Council formation with precision. That seemed impossible. They anticipated Council movements before the orders were even given, adapting their tactics faster than the collective consciousness could respond. The turning point came when the human ships revealed their secret weapon. Instead of trying to match Council collective tactics, they had developed something entirely new. Warfare based on individual initiative coordinated through quantum-linked battle networks. Each human captain could see the entire battlefield through their ship's quantum connection, but unlike the Council's collective consciousness, they retained their individual creativity and decision-making ability. They could cooperate like a hive mind when needed, but break away to pursue individual opportunities when the situation called for it. The Council fleet was devastated. Ships that had been built to fight collectively couldn't adapt to opponents, who fought as both individuals and as a group simultaneously. Admiral Kethmore watched in horror as his formations were torn apart by tactics he couldn't understand or counter. Within 6 hours, the battle was over. The mighty Council punishment fleet had been shattered by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive refugees. Admiral Kethmore's flagship was crippled and drifting, its biohull breached in a dozen places. Instead of finishing off the defeated fleet, human rescue ships moved among the wreckage, saving Council survivors. Admiral Kethmore found himself in a human medical bay, being treated by doctors who should have been his enemies. Commander Rob Peterson visited him as he recovered. The human officer looked tired, but not angry. "Why?" Admiral Kethmore asked, through his translator. "Why save us after we came to destroy you?" Rob sat down beside the medical bed. "Because that's what humans do. We fight when we have to, but we don't kill when we don't have to." "I do not understand your species," the Admiral admitted. "The Council never did," Rob replied. "That's why you're losing." As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, Commander Peterson transmitted humanity's declaration to every listening post, every communication relay, and every inhabited world within 1,000 light-years. "For 30 years you confined us to one system, believing us too dangerous for the stars," the message said. "You were wrong about the danger, but right about one thing. We were never meant to be confined." The revelation that followed shook the foundations of galactic civilization. Humanity hadn't just broken their confinement. They had built an empire spanning 47 star systems, with a population exceeding 12 billion and a military that had been preparing for this moment. For 3 decades, the galaxy would never be the same. The Council's reaction to their defeat was exactly what Fleet Admiral Chris Moore had expected. Within days of Admiral Keith Moore's humiliating loss, every Council species committed ships to the largest military alliance in galactic history. 2,000 vessels gathered at the galactic core, ready to crush the human rebellion once and for all. Admiral Moore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Liberty, and studied the enemy fleet composition. Massive hive mind dreadnoughts that could coordinate their fire with terrifying precision. Zephyrian crystal ships that could share energy between vessels. Aquarian bioships that could repair themselves during battle. Ethereal energy cruisers that could phase in and out of normal space. "Sir, final count shows 2,143 enemy ships," reported his tactical officer, Commander Lisa Hayes. "We have 812 vessels ready for battle." The numbers were daunting, but Admiral Moore had learned not to judge battles by ship counts alone. The recent victory at Centauri had proven that human tactics could overcome superior numbers. Still, this would be the ultimate test. "All captains, this is Admiral Moore," he announced over the fleet communication network. "Today we fight not just for ourselves, but for the right of every individual in the galaxy to think their own thoughts and make their own choices. Today we show the Council what freedom really means." The decisive battle took place at the Orion Junction, the galaxy's most important hyperspace crossroads. Control of this system meant control of trade routes that connected half the galaxy. The council had chosen the location to demonstrate their power. They had no idea they were about to lose everything they held dear. Council forces arranged themselves in the traditional formation, collective species linking their minds for coordinated attacks. The hive mind dreadnoughts formed the center, their insectoid crews thinking as one massive organism. Zephyrian ships created energy-sharing networks that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Captain Emma Ross commanded a squadron of human destroyers on the fleet's left flank. Her ships moved with fluid grace, each vessel responding to battlefield conditions with individual initiative, while maintaining perfect coordination with the group. "All ships, remember your training," Emma told her captains. "We're not just fighting ships today. We're fighting an entire way of thinking that says individuals don't matter." Lieutenant Colonel Jack Stone led the fighter squadrons that would serve as the battle's decisive factor. His pilots flew with a precision that amazed even veteran council commanders. Each fighter moved independently, but as part of a larger pattern that seemed to anticipate every enemy action. The battle began with the council's standard opening, a massive coordinated assault designed to overwhelm enemy defenses through sheer firepower. Thousands of energy beams lashed out from the alien fleet, synchronized by collective consciousness into patterns of devastating beauty. But the human ships weren't where the aliens expected them to be. Captain Ross's destroyers had broken formation. At the last second, each ship following its captain's individual judgment about where the safest position might be. The coordinated attack struck empty space while human ships appeared behind council formations, firing into their unprotected rear sections. The real surprise came when Dr. Gary White's experimental weapon was deployed for the first time. The quantum disruption field didn't destroy enemy ships. Instead, it did something far more devastating to collective species. It severed their connection to the group consciousness that bound them together. Suddenly, hive-mind drones who had never experienced individual thought found themselves alone, in their own heads. The terror was overwhelming. Crews that had functioned as extensions of a greater will suddenly had to make decisions as individuals, something they had never learned to do. The psychological impact spread through the council. Fleet like a virus, Zephyrian captains who had shared collective wisdom for centuries found themselves cut off from their crystal networks. Aquarian crews who had always swum in shared thoughts discovered the frightening isolation of individual consciousness. Some ships simply stopped fighting, their crews paralyzed by the sudden responsibility of making their own decisions. Others turned their weapons on each other as newly awakened individual minds succumbed to panic and confusion. Admiral Moore watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart and felt a mixture of triumph and sadness. "All ships, cease fire," he ordered. "Prepare to accept surrenders." Captain Ross's voice came over the communication network. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from over 300 council ships. Their crews are confused. They don't know how to function as individuals. Patch me through to all ships, both friendly and enemy," Admiral Moore said. His voice echoed across the battlefield, reaching every vessel in both fleets. "This is Admiral Moore of the Human Colonial Navy. To all council forces I offer you something your collective species have never experienced: the choice to surrender as individuals, not as extensions of a greater will." He paused, looking out at the scattered remains of the once mighty council fleet. "We will not destroy those who yield, but neither will we return to our cage. The age of collective conformity is ending. The age of individual freedom has begun." The aftermath of the Battle of Orion Junction reshaped galactic civilization forever. The council structure collapsed as member species struggled with newly awakened individual consciousness. The hive mind fractured into millions of separate minds, each trying to understand what it meant to be alone with their own thoughts. Some species embraced their liberation. The younger generations of Zephyrians began creating individual crystal patterns instead of sharing collective ones. Aquarian children learned to swim through their own thoughts rather than the species-wide mental ocean their parents had known. Other species retreated to their homeworld, desperately trying to rebuild their collective unity. They saw individual consciousness as a disease that humans had inflicted upon them, something to be cured rather than celebrated. President Karen Walsh, now in her 70s, stood once again at the window of her Luna base office. But this time, she wasn't looking at human ships and factories. She was watching the first-class graduate from the Terran Academy, where young aliens came to learn what humans called individual freedom. A young Zephyrian student approached her, its crystal body glowing with colors that no collective consciousness would have approved. "President Walsh," the student said, "I wanted to thank you for what your species has given us." "What have we given you?" Karen asked. "The right to be myself," the student replied. "For the first time in my species' history, I can think thoughts that are mine alone. I can dream dreams that no one else shares. I can choose my own path." Karen smiled and patted the young alien on what passed for a shoulder. "That's all any of us ever wanted, the right to be ourselves." Outside the window, ships from dozens of species traveled freely between the stars. No longer bound by council restrictions or collective limitations, individual beings from across the galaxy were exploring, learning, and growing in ways their ancestors never could have imagined. The human colonial empire had kept its promise. They had not become conquerors. Instead, they had become teachers, showing the galaxy that the greatest strength came not from unity of thought, but from diversity of spirit. On 1,000 worlds, children of a dozen species learned to dream their own dreams, just as humans had always done. The stars belonged to everyone now, and every individual mind could reach for them in their own way. The age of collective stagnation was over. The age of individual exploration had begun, and it had all started with one species that refused to be caged.